Welcome back to Interview At, where we teach you how to use the Amazon leadership principles to land your dream job. As a reminder, my name is Brandon Watson. I'm an ex-senior executive from Microsoft, Amazon, Oracle, my own startups, etc. I've hired lots of people, I've built lots of teams, and so I'm usually the guy on the other side of the table or part of the team that is deciding whether or not you're going to pass your interview. So the feedback that I give here, well, it comes from decades of experience. And one of the reasons why I do these videos on interviewout.com is to show you with real interviews. These are actual people trying to level up their interview skills with me at interviewout.com. Where you can instantly get your free mock interview at interviewout.com. They are trying to level up their skills to make sure they land their dream job. And so the feedback that they get helps them understand how to think about their story creation, how to think about their structure within their content, whether or not they're mapping the level of their story, right? The experience level matches the job they're trying to get. Right? It's kind of that age-old adage, dress for the job you want, not the job you have. Same thing with your story. Show up with stories that map and demonstrate that you're ready for that next level versus talking about a bunch of stuff that's many years old that doesn't really paint you in the best possible light. So this week we have a product manager who is targeting an in-place promotion, which is the first one of these I've had where someone was interviewing kind of next level up job within their existing company. So that was interesting and unique. But they are a product manager. The leadership principle on which we focused was our right a lot. And the question that was asked was, how do they go about making decisions when they don't have enough data to support their decisions? So as always, we'll play back the mock interview and I will jump in with commentary as we go to help you understand what I was thinking as the interviewer, what I was probing at and why, and how the candidate could have done better.
For this question, I want to focus on a technology decision that you made, okay? Or that you were influencing as a driver to get made. But I would prefer that you err on a decision that you made versus that you influenced, if that makes sense. And specifically a decision where you just didn't have enough data, right? You didn't have the benchmarks, you didn't have the data, you didn't have enough data to make a clear decision, or rather the decision to make wasn't clear. In the absence of sufficient data, what guided your choice? How'd you make the call? Let's talk about it.
Yeah, let me kind of draw a picture of the software I was working on. It was a CRM system with a large accounting provider. It's actually global, and with the CRM offering, the product was around 16 years old at this stage, and I was in a place where we didn't have a lot of analytics on it because due to a partner selling agreement, they sold all of these products in-house. Most often they weren't essentially always connected to the internet. They were closed systems. But for a multitude of reasons, I didn't have any analytics. So what I did was you got in touch with the marketing department about putting up a post about asking for contributors to meet with us to get feedback on our product. And I got around 20 different leads off that, which I then chased up, and there are people in the UK and in America as well. And these were various people who used the core accounting products in those countries that all had an integration with our CRM offering. What I took then was a series of interviews over the space of around 2 months, and recorded the interviews, got talking with the people, just got to know their pain points like I had done. And I tried to talk to different level people. So if I got in touch and I was speaking to the CEO or the head of a small business, and generally they were SMBs, the ideal or the typical clients we had, I'd ask them, get to know them, get to understand the background of their business, and then see by the end of the call, could I set up a walkthrough of some UX designs I had after I'd done the initial thing for a second minute, and also see could I get to speak to someone else who was at the coalface of their business, be it in a call center or be it in the sales department or the service center. Usually it was sales and service use cases that we were dealing with. So
I'm going to jump in here because there's a couple things I'm thinking as I'm listening back to this for the first time since doing the interview. One, I was actually waiting to jump in with this comment. And if you notice, the candidate really just kind of kept talking. There were no logical breakpoints. I'm not even sure where some of the periods were in the sentences. So as a candidate, when you're presenting content, you do want to have at least a little bit of a thought process around your cadence where you can allow for interruptions, right? Because the interviewer doesn't want to be rude, right? But having to force in a question makes it hard because it's to make you feel like you've been cut off. Maybe you're not being listened to, right? So just think about your cadence as you go to have logical kind of interruption points if they have clarification questions. That's part number one. Part number two, This is actually a fairly decent setup for a kind of late, early career, early mid-career product manager type. But when delivering this answer, ask yourself, do you actually know what decision they made? Right? Because the question was, tell me about a technology decision that you made for which you have very little data. And he's now walked me through a pretty significant part of his setup, and I still don't know what the actual decision was. So, in true Amazon fashion, start with the end in mind. Sometimes it's helpful to have a summary sentence at the front to kind of let me know what was the decision you made and why, or just even what the decision was made and for whom, right? The customer. Use that as your slug line and then kind of back up and go into the setup. Because without that, as I'm listening to this answer, it's hard for me to know what he's trying to do. One other point. In talking through this, he introduces the concept of it took a couple of months, I think he said 2 months, to talk to all the customers, which, again, as someone who's listening to this, my first question is, why did it take so long? Right? 2 months is a long time to burn doing customer interviews, especially when you've got leads that have come in. Why did it take that long to follow up? He didn't really frame that up very well, so it introduces a red flag where if I don't ask the follow-on question as the interviewer, there's kind of this now thing hanging out there, and all I'm thinking is, well, is this person good at his job? Was there a reason? For all I know, it could have just been scheduling challenges, right? And because of the prioritization of the work, internally they looked at it and said, this is a low priority thread. It can take a couple months. It's not really impacting current things that we need to do. All of that is a great wrapper around why he made the decision, but that doesn't come through in this answer. So therefore, I'm left to kind of fill in the blanks. And in general, the interviewer is not going to fill in the blanks the way you, the candidate, could have. So don't create the unforced error by leaving some basic questions unanswered when you're delivering your content.
I talked to a slew of people, and I might go down a little tangent here, but one nugget gave me a hunch, and I went and the feature built from there. So the action was to kind of get some features that the product needed because it's so old. What way would you modernize it, and is it required by our users? So I took from the first interview or second interview, a conversation with a florist, an online florist in the UK. And they basically had a slew of real knowledgeable salespeople on their calls. And when I talked to those individuals who were doing the sales call, it came up that they disliked the large amount of text on the screen, and they found it very hard to see. And I asked them about their monitor size and a couple of things like this. And it turned out that they were varying ages, and the demographic of the users was wide. It wasn't all young people with perfect vision. So it turned out that in many years, we hadn't actually done some very basic accessibility things for our product. So keeping some really useful tools on the top nav ever present on the page, and also being able to quickly increase and decrease the font. It sounds like very basic things, but when it's missing, it's a pain point for absolutely everyone. So when speaking to the next client, I again dropped in some questions that I learned, and this snowballed. And to get more so to the action, so I took it snowballed after validating this on 12 or so calls with various different businesses in various parts of the world, and that most people had the same thing. The content, you had to scroll up and down several times to get back to the key actions and the key use cases that you would use in the product. And also you couldn't see it. So it had a big eye strain, headache kind of feel to it. So it wasn't pleasant. We modernized the top nav to create quick searching, to be much faster, introduced a new search that could search across all CRM entities. We increased a very simple way of using iconography to make it quick for the user to see. We reduced the number of mouse and keyboard clicks to make sure these people who sometimes had phones in their hands could do it could use the product very quickly to look up a user, and reduce the time to look up a lead or time to look up a product. And overall, it was really well received. When it went to the market and went back as prototypes to those people that we initially talked, they loved it. So it was a real big win for me, and I was delighted because it came from Qualitative, and once it was out there, it kind of got more and more compliments.
So one of the benefits of having done the interview, taking copious notes, and getting to rewatch it, I already know what I'm about to ask next. So here's the thing. Remember when I asked you, or kind of pointed out at the front end, whether or not you picked up what the decision was? We've now gone through a pretty lengthy answer, if I'm being honest. And there's a lot of things that happen, and there's a lot of great content in here. but it's still not clear what the decision that was made where there wasn't enough data to make the call, right? Where they felt comfortable making the call. And so this is where a situation where, and this happens a lot with candidates, where you'll just start talking and you start telling your story because you're just so ready to go to tell your story, and you're just kind of shoehorn your story into the interview that you, like, from a structure point of view, did you answer the question? Did you answer the question that was asked? And if you don't, and also if you speak for a very long time, what can get lost in all this is a potentially great answer with a lot of great content that we could have poked on. But I'm still struggling as the interviewer, like, well, did he even understand the question? Like, what are we doing here? And so this is a situation where it's an unforced error where better structure and kind of thinking through how he presented the content and starting with the end in mind potentially could have saved him from.
So if you forgive my asking this as a follow-up, it sounds like you discovered a new feature set based on your questions, which is normal and good and fine and great and awesome. But the question itself was, you were making a technology decision when you didn't have enough data. But from your answer, it sounds like you gathered the data as you went along and then made a decision. So did I miss a piece of that, or was it just the question?
No, I definitely went in the wrong direction from your question there. I apologize. So when I haven't got enough data, and I've in more recent times I've been asked to weigh one feature versus the next. Sometimes we'll use
Well, no, hold on. What I don't want you to do is now venture off another answer. I just want to make sure I didn't miss it, because if you did, that's fine. I'll work around it. That's totally fine. I just wanted to, sometimes questions, they get missed. It's fine. It's not the end of the world. But I just want to make sure it wasn't that I missed it in the answer. Fine. Now let me ask the follow-up.
So that was me being a nice interviewer, right? Pointing out, hey, you kind of missed it, and let's not go venturing off into another answer, which then kind of muddies the waters and confuses whether or not we're achieving what I'm trying to achieve as the interviewer, which is, can you do this job and can you do it here? I was being nice about it and said, nope, I'll just work around it. That's fine. But not all interviewers are nice. And it's entirely possible that this happens in an interview and they just let you talk and talk and talk and talk. And all they write down is, did not answer a question. Then they move on. So this is why you've really got to pay attention and be aware of the question that gets asked, but also, as you go, I was far less subtle about it here. There are times where good interviewers will ask you leading questions to kind of bring you back to, hey, you missed this thing, so let's kind of loop back to that. Pay attention to those questions because they matter.
Okay, so cool. You went and made these changes, and I like your focus on, or how you talked about it was, being able to click while having a phone in hand, right? That's very much a very highly customer obsessed kind of point, right? It's understanding that's a very specific user who's behaving in a certain way, right? And they're actually doing this or whatever. But as you think about the feedback that you got, right, about the text size and screen and all these things, what did you deprioritize? Like, what did you hear in all of that you said, maybe not? Right? I'm just trying to understand, like, how did you prioritize what was important versus what wasn't?
For what I've witnessed through software use, and also as a product manager, is often people see new as better, and they forget that going back to the basics is just as important. So weighing up when people asked, would you like to see this feature implemented? What if and I always use the magic wand question with the users, like, what would you prefer instead? And it wasn't really triggering the people. It wasn't triggering the people to suggest something else. The majority of people who deal with the accounts of these softwares will ask for big flagship feature sets, but the people on the ground who really deal with it and complain about the software or suggest that we keep it for another year, that's the ones that I wanted to address. So to try and answer your question, it made sure that I gave enough color to the thing that I didn't deem as a big flagship feature. It wasn't from competitive analysis. It wasn't from data. It was merely from a spark of inspiration from getting to know our customers more. And I know that's probably not exactly what you asked, but that's the best I can answer.
No,
right?
So this is a good recognition by the candidate that they did not do a great job answering the question. That's good ownership, and that's awesome. This is a reasonable, actually, answer. If it's a junior answer, right, it presents as a more junior PM, that's a reasonable answer. But again, the leadership principle here at work is, all right, a lot. what you want to be demonstrating in these sorts of questions is that you have a framework for how you make decisions to ensure that you're making the right decision on a repeated basis, and that you're taking calculated risks along the way, and understand where the one-way doors and the two-way doors exist so that you can unwind bad decisions if they go wrong. But if you make a one-way door decision, gosh, that you've kind of got the right amount of data to ensure you're making the right decision at the right time. And in this case, he didn't really walk through a repeatable framework to help me understand how he was prioritizing his features. And so it presents as a more junior PM-ish type answer. It could be improved upon if he was able to say, well, for these features, we look at the long-term impact. Is it easy? There's a common box framework, which is, level of impact and level of effort, right? So high impact, low effort, that's a no-brainer. High impact, high effort, a little bit less of a no-brainer, but you still want to do those. But like low impact, low effort, maybe do it to clean up some bugs. Low impact, high effort, those are the ones you stay away from, right? So as a prioritization framework, that's an easy way as a product manager to approach these sorts of problems, to demonstrate that you at least have a way to think through what's in front of me and what am I going to do. That didn't land in this answer.
It's fine. It's again, no red flags here. It's just I wanted to make sure I didn't miss something. But how do you then, so you go and you make these changes and you ship them out, right? How are you then making sure on an ongoing basis you had made the right call to focus on these non-flagship features?
I mentioned earlier on, but just to draw a little bit of color, the way the product was distributed around the world, I'm not sure if it was hundreds, but it was definitely a substantial amount of countries. This product was sold in tow with the local accounting solution, so partners were used to do that. And as of releasing new sets of features, they'd review it as well, kind of upselling their own things, but there'd be several reviews online. And again, this is how we tracked it. We didn't have, at that point in time, we didn't have more modern analytical tools available to us in the feature stack, in the software stack. So it was really just keeping an eye on that every couple of weeks, making sure if they came up with a new review, if it was exposed to a new market, just tracking it that way. So that's how we backed up the low level cold face feedback from the user and saw it scale up. And when we saw additional products that company I worked with had around a suite of 300 products across the globe, and they started taking some of the nods that we did when it came to quick accessible search utilities, shortcut keys, things that really help people in call centers and service use cases.
Okay, that was the end of the interview, because it was the end of that segment. So a top line takeaway from this was throughout the interview, the candidate presented as very customer obsessed, which is awesome, right? Very high customer empathy, wanting to build the right things for their customers. What surprised me in this answer, and we'll read the assessment that I would have read into the room had I been on the hiring loop. What surprised me was the lack of follow through or follow up, or discussion rather of follow up with all of these customer call outs, right? He went to great pains over 2 months to talk to all these customers. What was the follow up? Okay, hey, we're going to go build this thing. Here's what we plan to build. Let's talk about it, or let's create a set of demo accounts that you guys can use. Let us know what you think, but get the feedback. But none of that was presented in the context of this answer. So, in the question being, when you make decisions when you don't have enough data, you can collect data after you build the thing. How do you then loop that data back into your process to make sure you're building the right thing? None of that landed, which caused some concerns. But again, for a more junior PM, these are learnable skills, but it certainly didn't land in this context. And second, there was no metrics, right? What were the metrics of success? And in all answers, no matter what leadership principle, no matter what level you are, when possible, present metrics and data to support your conclusions. It's a simple thing for you to do, but it's so often left out. I continue to be surprised at how often this gets left out. So let's look at the feedback I would have read, or the assessment I would have read in the room for this candidate. All right, a lot. Candidate presented an answer which showed good instincts on how to think about customer-facing decisions, but raised concerns for our right a lot by not providing clear metrics-driven decision-making or any framework for ongoing management and validation of the decisions being made. The interview to this point felt The interview to this point felt that there were details being purposely left out for the purposes of confidentiality, but the candidate is overcorrecting and likely leaving out key details which have nothing to do with confidentiality. So, as I said, very customer obsessed candidate that came through a variety of the different questions that we asked, which was awesome. And in this case, I could have just done a little bit better job of structuring the content up front, leading with the end, right? Here's the decision I made and why. It's just a slug line. Then working through the decisions they made, and then ultimately talking about how they support their decision with data that they can collect or could have collected after making the decision. Of course, in this particular answer, the candidate went off the rails just a little bit and didn't answer the question as asked. That's another note for you, is just listen for those questions from the interviewer when they choose to be nice or are actually good interviewers and paying attention. They're going to try and loop you back to make sure you're answering the question that they ask, because oftentimes as candidates get really excited, you want to share your story, you talk through your thing, maybe you're presenting a speech from memory, you forget something, and you're so focused on just getting the content out of your mouth that you don't tie it back to the question that was asked, and that's oftentimes an unforced error that just doesn't need to occur. So that's it for this week. Hopefully you learned something, and do me a favor, if this is the kind of content that you love, go ahead and like the content. If you really, really love it, go ahead and subscribe to the channel, and hopefully we can help you land your dream job.